Welcome everyone to the Spoiler Warning podcast, recorded as always in the construction site that I call a home office. We have pieces of door, we have pieces of flooring that were under other pieces of flooring, and unfortunately we also have blocks, which you can finally see in this angle where I haven't quite painted as well as I should have. Today we are talking about the future of wrestling. We're talking about the future of WWE. We're talking about the big names now, the big names soon, and the big names in an eternity from now. The ones who potentially will be the future when I'm not even here anymore, which feels increasingly likely as each day goes on, because it's wrestling and I can't do the things that they can do. If I could do the things that they could do, I still wouldn't do the things that they can do because those things scare me for obvious reasons. I don't like pain. I don't understand anybody who does. To each their own. I don't want to yuck your yum. If you're into that, all power to you. I'm not. Doesn't work for me. So when you look at wrestlers and look at the correlation between sadists and masochists that are there, doesn't it just make sense? I've wandered off on one there. Anyway, I want to talk about the future of WWE, and to start there, we actually have to talk a little bit about the history. Now, I'm not going to go back too far. In fact, I'm only going to go far as back as current legends. Legends of the industry who are still actively wrestling, whose careers don't seem set to end anytime soon, or in fact, are actively being ended. I'm going to look at your John Cena's, your AJ Styles, your Randy Orton, Rey Mysterio. We're also going to look a little bit at certain wrestlers like Trish Stratus, who does come back every now and then, as does Lita, but I think it's very well recognised her time is up. Nikki Bella recently returned, and she's working to put over the future in Stephanie Vaquer, so we're going to talk about that bracket. We're then going to talk a little bit about the now, the current, that brief overlap when you are both a top guy and still focused on career advancement, because that doesn't last. The second you hit the top, you should be focused on the people beneath you. You absolutely should. And I'm looking at people like Cody Rhodes, who's been wrestling a lot of legends, but hasn't necessarily been wrestling a lot of future talent. Those days are coming, because he's not quite top level yet in WWE eyes. We're then going to talk about the future. The ones that I haven't mentioned yet, but who you know, the young, the strong, the ready. And that, I think, is the biggest question mark in all of this. The ready. Who is actually ready to make that step up and become a household name? Because unfortunately, with wrestling as it is right now, we are not in the Attitude Era, we're not in the Ruthless Aggression Era, we're not even in the PG era, when there was a multitude of wrestlers ready, willing, and able, see what I did there, to step up and to fight. Some of that fight has gone. Not just in WWE, but outside of that as well. I talked to a number of wrestling promoters who see their wrestlers struggling with promos now, because it's a dying art. Because the ability to control that crowd is nowadays secondary to being a great wrestler and putting on 5-star matches. I remember promos. I remember them far more than the matches. I don't think Stone Cold Steve Austin would ever enter the Hall of Fame on his wrestling skills. I don't. After the neck injury in the match with Owen Hart, he couldn't deliver to the same level. The ringmaster was gone in that moment. But Steve Austin was a brawler. 5-star matches, yes, he got one against Bret Hart, but 5-star matches were not what he was interested in. He didn't care. What he cared about was getting that pop. What he cared about was getting that connection. Promos allowed him to do that. And that is a huge difference that you're going to see when we talk about legends, and then we compare it to the current generation coming through. A lot of it is promos. Let's start then with some of the legends. Let's start with John Cena, the obvious choice to start with, because here is a legend who's no longer in the making. It's been 24 years. 24 years of wrestling. And he has deserved every championship he's had. But a huge part of the reason he's had double figures, a huge part of the reason he is a record breaker, is because there was such a dearth of talent beyond him. When John Cena came in, he was ready. You could see them developing Randy Orton. You could see them developing Batista. That was kind of it in that moment. Brock Lesnar, the class of 2002. Who else is mentioned in the class of 2002? Well, Shelton Benjamin, every now and then. That's it. And let me just throw this out there. Who's mentioned of the class of 2003? 2004? 2005? The people John Cena were working against were previous generations. JBL, who'd been wrestling many years before. The Big Show was a big part of John Cena's development, and of course Brock Lesnar's development as well. Triple H was instrumental in the work with Randy Orton and Batista, but they were not, in that moment, the future. They were the top guys. They were potentially the legends. The work with The Undertaker, for example. Beyond John Cena, beyond that group, I'll count Randy Orton in this as well because we're going to be talking about him, there was a lack of talent ready to make that step up. And you know that quite a few wrestlers in that period, World Heavyweight Champions, WWF/WWE Champions, they were simply nowhere near the level of a John Cena. The top level at that time was The Rock, who was barely there, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels, who'd made his return. There was other wrestlers involved, Ric Flair, for example, The Undertaker, as I've mentioned. Kane had a bit of a comeback, but Kane was never really a main event guy. He was never really considered seriously for those championships. The Undertaker as well, as the American badass at the time, he went through a lot of parts where he was missing, where he was injured, where he was simply unavailable. So people like John Cena rose to that top level fast. It's why people like Kurt Angle was so important, because Kurt Angle wasn't a top-level main eventer in that moment, but he became one very quickly because that's what they needed. It's why Chris Jericho was so important in those moments, even though his main event of WrestleMania was not very well received, primarily because of what it had followed. We talk about John Cena as that legend because of what he gave to the business, but also because he was always there. Because for about 10 years, he was all they had. Yes, you had the development of Randy Orton. Yes, you had the development of Batista, who only lasted about that 10 years. But for that 10 years, they kept revisiting names who'd made their name well before him. We had Royal Rumble wins for Name Redacted. We had Royal Rumble wins for Rey Mysterio. We had numerous pushes for The Undertaker, for The Big Show, for Kane. And of course we had the JBL push. We had the King Booker push. We had Edge rising to the top. But all of these were a previous generation to John Cena. Class of 2002 was a league of its own. And it took about a decade to reach the point where we had anything close to the same level, which is when we saw the Shield and the Wyatt family debuting. It was that long before we were able to reach that level. I've touched on Randy Orton there. I've also mentioned Rey Mysterio. Both still wrestling now. I'd also argue CM Punk belongs in this group. Not many years left, but at the top while he can. Attempting to give back while he can. CM Punk is working with Jey Uso at the moment. He's trying to get more work with LA Knight. He's done a lot of work with Drew McIntyre. People who are reaching that top level but are not quite there yet. Drew McIntyre, very close, I feel. Certainly not in the same bracket as a Roman Reigns or a Seth Rollins or a Becky Lynch. Trish Stratus as well, in that same time as John Cena, rose to the top. These were wrestlers that made a huge impact and even now are working to give back. Rey Mysterio certainly has a vested interest in who he gives back to, which is why Dominik Mysterio is getting so much airtime. But also, it's not that he's bad, is it? It really isn't. These wrestlers are trying to give back in the latter parts of their career. AJ Styles also fits this bracket, even though it wasn't really WWE that made him, as it were. They are deserving of these moments. They are deserving of these accolades. They are deserving of being called legends. But they are also the past. They are. There's other wrestlers currently wrestling that you may consider the top level right now. But they're also quite open about the fact that they're not looking to have very long careers anymore. Roman Reigns is straddling that line. He is currently at that top level. He's also, after the championship run with the Bloodline, entered legend territory. But he's also saying he doesn't necessarily want to be wrestling much longer. I don't think we'll see Roman Reigns wrestle beyond the 2020s. I don't think we'll necessarily see him wrestling much after 2028. We don't exactly see him wrestling much now. Seth Rollins has picked up a number of really quite serious injuries. He's had to come back in Super Cena mode time after time after time. This guy's in pain. And he's wrestled in pain a lot. He's someone else who I think is absolutely, right now, the top level. But if we compare the vision to Evolution, as I have previously, Seth is the Triple H figure. And Triple H was already beyond that level. He was already that legend. He could have retired a long time ago and nobody would have batted an eyelid. They would have said, great, good job, well done. And that would have been that. Seth Rollins, a large part because of injuries, is in that position. He doesn't have too many years left. He can't have too many years left. There isn't that much more he can offer when he's in so much pain all of the time. I'm looking at Becky Lynch here, also straddling the line a little bit, but I think because of her relative age and her fitness record, she is more firmly in the top level right now category. She is in a position right now where she is giving back, which is what the legends are supposed to do. I reckon she's got a few years left before she becomes like the codified legend. Charlotte Flair also fits nicely into that category. Alexa Bliss as well. They're in a tag team for a reason. They are now in a position where they are the top level. They are established and they still have many years to come, even though I don't necessarily think the career of women in WWE has been as long as the career of men. There's also an incredible amount of talented women coming through looking for their spot. I want to spend a moment on Cody Rhodes. And it will probably be more than a moment, let's be honest. Cody Rhodes is that top level, we know that. But I would also argue that while it looks like the next era of WrestleMania main events will be dedicated to Cody Rhodes, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, etc., I don't think we're getting a 50. I don't. I think Cody Rhodes steers more towards legend than current. And that's why I've got to say, Cody Rhodes is not the future of the WWE. He isn't. I just don't see a world in which we get another 10 years of Cody Rhodes at the top. It doesn't make sense to me. I think wrestlers in this generation don't want to be wrestling for 50 years. They don't want to put their bodies through that. They want to spend some time with their families. They want to spend some time with their children. And they earn enough money to make comfortable livings without killing themselves for it. We don't want the painkiller addictions anymore. We don't want Perk Angle. We don't want Jeff Hardy and whatever happened there. We want people to be safe. We want people to be secure. We want less Hell in a Cell matches. And that's why Blood and Guts, War Games, is for the young. And I think Cody Rhodes is already in a position where he's recognising that. Yes, he's in War Games, but War Games and Blood and Guts are very different as regards toll they take on the body. I think that's also one of the reasons AEW and WWE have different audiences, and one of the reasons he may have wanted to swap back over again. Your body will last longer in WWE. It just will. It absolutely just will. And it's also why a wrestler who is in that legend category like Edge wasn't necessarily that wanted by WWE. Even the threat of, oh, I'll go to AEW. Okay. The WWE stared him down and said, you do what you got to do. And that is exactly what happened. I reported at the time that there was an offer on the table. It wasn't a good one in Edge's eyes, and I'm not going to blame him for that. I'm not going to blame him for looking out for himself. I'm not going to blame him for looking out for his family. He got a great deal in AEW. It extended his career a little bit. He got a limited day contract, which is another way in which your modern wrestler protects themselves. Roman Reigns, what can I say, started a trend on that one. Let's take a moment then, because we've spoken about the now, the top level. And we've spoken about the Becky Lynches. We've spoken about the Charlotte Flairs. We've spoken about Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, Cody Rhodes. There are others who are in that position. But a lot of the next level is future. There are a couple, unfortunately, who don't fit in any of these categories. I'm looking at someone like Sami Zayn. Hugely popular, hugely capable. Not necessarily a top-level star. Not necessarily going to be given those opportunities, but will damn sure root for an Intercontinental Championship win. Sami Zayn is still my outside hope for Royal Rumble 2026 winner, but there's others I can see facing off against Cody. And against CM Punk, a lot of movement there. It was supposed to be Seth Rollins versus Roman Reigns. We could see at War Games coming up something new featuring Roman Reigns and CM Punk. But that means a heel turn, and I don't think fans really are going to turn on either of them. Just awkward for everyone involved. The future in WWE is bright. It really is. We have a generation of talent coming through that has been trained at the Performance Center, that has been trained by a generation before, and we have a huge variety of talent who've taken very different paths to get there. I know it's difficult sometimes for a lot of fans to say, oh, Jade Cargill, she's great. There have been missteps, there's been botches and mistakes. However, she's only just starting her wrestling career. She has a lot of years ahead of her to improve. Jade Cargill's got to be considered. Tiffany Stratton has got to be considered. She exploded. Tiffy time was a huge thing, and now she's lost that championship. She has a chance to sort of reset. Because when you have the championship, you're in the public eye. Everyone's looking at you. When you lose that championship, you get to do something else. You get to fight from beneath. You get to reconnect with fans who think they know everything about you. You can see what I mean when I say the women's division has such talent coming through, because that's just two names. We haven't mentioned Stephanie Vaquer yet. Currently a world champion after a hell of a debut year on that main roster. Stephanie Vaquer is an incredibly talented wrestler who has drawn the eye for many, many ways and certainly makes Booker T explode in his pants every possible opportunity. But apparently everyone's fine with that, so I have to be as well. So yeah, cool, whatever. Wrestling is like that sometimes. Whatever your gimmick is, if you embrace it, we're gonna. If you live the gimmick, we're gonna let you. Stephanie Vaquer is also, worth pointing out, an incredible wrestler. And yes, it's another one where the promos aren't necessarily the strongest. I'd say all of the people I've mentioned so far, their promos are not the strongest. But the wrestling is incredible. The characterization is brilliant. The pageantry, the soul of wrestling, is secure. They've got Roxanne, they've got Julia. Those are just recent names that are getting involved. You've also got Zelina Vega. Very talented, not necessarily getting the opportunities. So there is still a huge amount of talent in that pool who are ready to step up, ready to get involved, and ready to raise some hell. Lash Legend just debuted on the main roster properly and is now in a tag team with Nia Jax, meaning she'll be at least somewhat protected from the scrutiny because everyone already hates Nia Jax, so Lash Legend will be fine. Moving on to the men's division. Bron Breakker, The Vision, Bronson Reed. We have to talk about this. Hand-picked, by the way, by Seth Rollins. Hand-picked by Paul Heyman. This is a group that was designed to elevate. Or evolve, shall we say. It was made for evolution. And they are both incredibly talented. When Brock Lesnar was pulled from the Royal Rumble, Bron Breakker got one phone call and was told, hey, we need you to come in and do exactly what Brock did. Can you do it? And that is all they said. And he said, I will do whatever the hell it takes. And that's exactly what happened. He stepped into that match. There was no briefing. There was very little preparation. Most of the wrestlers in that ring had worked out their spots with Brock Lesnar. It's why there was still a stare down with Gunter that there was supposed to be with Brock Lesnar, because Brock versus Gunter is constantly something that we're moving towards. Brock versus Gunter might well be happening this year's WrestleMania, or more likely it's going to be Punk versus Gunter now. A lot of moving parts because of the Seth injury. But anyway, I'm talking too fast again. I got told to slow down. When it comes to the future, Bron Breakker is one of the people that the WWE have said, that one. That one right there. Them's my people. Bronson Reed continues to prove how good and how talented he is. I would also say these two, once again, not given great chances with promos. Gunter, we know, is the future of the WWE. Very close to already being a top-level talent, similar to Jey Uso, in that they're basically already there. They are just on the way back to reclaim that position. Gunter, also, promos, not great. Jey Uso, promos, okay. He knows a word, and it's a word that works for him. There's plenty more in the women's division as well. We know how good Bianca Belair is. She got a night one main event of WrestleMania against Sasha Banks, now Mercedes Money. She showed what she can do. We know she's talented, and her promos are also quite sharp, quite snappy, and quite good. Really well-rounded individual who can do everything. She's in that spot. Rhea Ripley, we know, is one of the biggest names in wrestling now. Promos are incredible. Wrestling's incredible. The presence, the gravitas. WWE only needed to get out of Rhea Ripley's way. She was always going to be this big. And the WWE would have made a huge mistake not giving her everything as quickly, as rapidly as they did. The women's division is looking bright. Got Liv Morgan there as well. She's out injured again, unfortunately, right now. But when she returns, she will make a hell of a splash. And there'll be a hell of a reception for her. She's on the cusp. That women's division is incredible. One more name I want to discuss. The future of WWE. The absolute pinnacle of what can be achieved. And that's Dominik Mysterio. This guy, even as a heel, gets so much love. This man could be the very top of the industry. This man is a first ballot Hall of Famer. That's the sort of thing we're talking about here. Because he's still got all the wrestling talent, but the thing he's got, which a lot of people that I've just listed have struggled with, is promos. The man can't just talk, the man can sing. Almost everything out of his mouth gets a huge, genuine reaction. Even if you hate this guy, you love this guy. And this is another area where Rey Mysterio making something happen. Rey Mysterio had it written in his contract that Dominik Mysterio would not go through developmental. He would pop up on the main roster, he'd get pushed, he'd win championships. Rey Mysterio gambled on Dominik. Because the WWE weren't sure they were able to sign Rey Mysterio. He was working for New Japan at the time, and the actual price was huge. But people were paying it, and WWE weren't. There was a fear that Rey Mysterio would take himself and Dominik to AEW because AEW were willing to pay it. But AEW weren't willing to guarantee championships for Dominik. WWE recognised what Rey Mysterio wanted, what he needed. And even if Dominik hadn't been this good, they still would have said yes. They looked out. Because Dominik Mysterio has elements of The Rock about him. But he's actually going to be there. That's the difference. There's a few more things we're going to discuss today. I promised a wrestling receipt. We got that coming. And I also want to talk about the podcast in general. So let's go wrestling receipt. There's a few different things to cover on today's wrestling receipt. I want to talk about the 6 months ago, that cage side seats cover, but there's also a few things that have come up that either I've reported or that someone else has confirmed or really gotten wrong that I want to talk about quite recently. We'll start with the 6 months ago. The resource we use is cage side seats. So 6 months ago, we start with May 9th, 2025. WrestleVote said WWE has plans for Penta and Rey Fenix to team together in the near future. That was 6 months ago. As yet it hasn't happened. It is planned to start shortly. But this one unfortunately has to go down as wrong. Shortly after that, we're talking May 12th, asked about Adam Copeland's return to AEW on a recent Fightful Select Q&A. So this is a paywall. Sean Ross Sapp said he hadn't heard a specific date, but he is planned for AEW All In for a significant match, so plenty of time to help build for that. He did not return for a match, but he did return at the event, so this is incorrect. May 13th, in a piece on New England's importance in wrestling history from Boston ABC affiliate WCVB, John Cena's father said that his son's final match will take place in Boston's TD Garden this December. No WWE events have been scheduled for December at that time, leading to speculation whether Cena's last match will be televised or part of a PLE. Now, this is incorrect. It's in Washington, D.C. It's still yet to happen. But I do want to point out, John Cena's father was the source here, and it was still wrong. Meanwhile, James Stewart of 98.5 The Sports Hub is claiming WWE is planning it for December 13th and is actually asking for $1.5 million commitments from host cities, which includes potentially Boston. Also says it would be a full-week takeover featuring Undertaker show, SmackDown and Saturday Night's main event. Cage Side Seats are giving this a 1 out of 2 because the date's correct, but there isn't any suggestion of a takeover. A report from PW Insider claims that WWE Evolution 2 will now take place on July 12th in Atlanta. That's the date of All In Texas. Insider says a Saturday night's main event will also take that same weekend. They've also mentioned Reddit user Kermit125, who was part of the rumour mill stating that the WWE had been sold to Saudi Arabia. But apparently got the date right for this one, so well done you. None of Sean Ross Sapp's sources on the roster have heard anything about Evolution 2. A lot of talk about this one. Sapp mentioned during a Fightful Select Q&A, again, paywall, adding that he's been unable to get anyone at the company to talk about the all-women's show, despite it being something he's following up on a lot. Now, I didn't hear much about this at the time, but when I publicly said I haven't heard anything about it, Sean Ross Sapp basically laid into me on Twitter, which is hilarious considering I reported before he did what he then said, and then got more news later, before this Q&A. It's amazing how nothing behind a paywall apparently happens. On May 14th, for what it's worth, Jonathan Coachman claimed on his The Coach and the Bro show that he has it on good authority that John Cena and The Rock will cross paths before the end of the summer. This has not happened. I have to say, Jonathan Coachman is so reliably wrong that I'm starting to think he actually does know what he's talking about. Because in order to be this reliably wrong, you have to know what right looks like. On Wrestling Observer Radio, they noted that it's possible the WWE draft could happen during the Memorial Day weekend takeover of Tampa, Florida. Didn't happen. Fightful notes it's at least possible Liv Morgan will be back on Raw next week, but that's not confirmed right now. She didn't, but she did come a week after, so fair enough. In an interview with Variety, CW President Brad Schwartz seemed to hint more NXT programming could be coming to the network. This also has not happened. May 15th, the belief in WWE creative circles, I always love phrases like that, the belief in certain circles, so who knows, is that Travis Scott will be available for Money in the Bank, and pitches have been made for Scott to partner with John Cena in tag and six-man matches. That from another PW Insider Elite report, paywall, that also reminds us Scott has been training with Booker T in Houston. Never seen. Didn't happen. Asked about Gunther getting a rematch for the WWE World Heavyweight title on a Wrestle Binge Q&A, WrestleVotes, who are now working for Fightful behind their paywall, said they believe it's happening because there will be an angle coming out of that involving Gunther, just a way to get him off the Money in the Bank card and onto a big Monday Night Raw to set something else up. Nothing else was set up. He won the championship instead. Yeah, that simple. It's that simple. That there's far too much being read into certain things, which just isn't true. There's no shortage of speculation that Angle, so the angle for Gunther, will lead to Goldberg's long-discussed retirement match, possibly for Night of Champions in Saudi Arabia on June 28th. Okay, so technically, Gunther did retire Goldberg, so you give him one for that. Date's wrong. The match itself didn't lead to it. So, didn't happen. Per Corey Hayes of PW Nexus, the reason WWE moved Evolution 2 from its previously rumoured... I'm going to stop you there. The only person who reported a July 5th date was Corey Hayes. So this was a case of I was right all along, even though I was wrong. That's how I'm personally reading this. Moving on then to the specific areas in which there's been reporting that I wanted to discuss. This is part of the Wrestling Receipt, which I discussed first on Friday's live show. So Chris Jericho is still trying to convince WWE to bring him back. News is that there are some concerns this could unsettle CM Punk after there was an issue with Nick Hausman, who was believed to be working with CM Punk at the time. Nick Hausman is believed to have made an accusation against Chris Jericho and provided zero evidence for it. Which, curiously enough, everything went very quiet shortly afterwards. John Cena has been asking to work with Dominik Mysterio for years. Dominik, for about 4 months, was a leading contender to actually retire John Cena. The match was pulled from Survivor Series. There was talk of John Cena versus Dominik Mysterio at Survivor Series for the IC title. It was never planned. It was pulled from that because of a scheduling conflict. I did report on last week's Friday live show, so about 10 days ago, that Nikki Bella was due a heel turn to turn on Stephanie Vaca to give Vaca a big name scalp. That has happened. Body Slam this week reported Stephanie Vaca versus Becky Lynch or Rhea Ripley is being discussed for WrestleMania. I've been talking about that for about 6 months in these channels. Regarding Nixon Newell and Miranda Elise in AEW, both of whom burned some serious bridges, Fightful, behind their paywall again, has reported both that Bryan Danielson has spoken to both women and that Bryan Danielson hasn't spoken to either woman. This is again from Cage Side Seats because I don't pay for Fightful's paywall. I'm not sure how both of those can be true, but if you want to find out which it is right now, you're going to have to pay for it. Wrestling Observer's Brian Alvarez has stated that an NXT deal starts at around $75,000 a year. This in response to Gigi Dolan, an actual NXT talent, or former NXT talent, saying it can go about as low as $30,000. I don't understand why Brian Alvarez thinks he knows better here. And finally, both Bodyslam and Ibu, who used to work for Wrestle Purists, but now works for something called Self-Made, which I'm guessing is just his own limited company, they say John Cena will be in War Games. Dave Meltzer says John Cena won't be in War Games. Let me know in the comments what you think is going to happen, because only one of those can be true. There is your wrestling receipt and some plentiful news to keep you going as well. Before I wrap up, there is one thing I want to say. Last week's podcast was our most watched yet. This was the one on Vince McMahon, and it drew a lot of hate in the comments from people who don't know who I am, don't know what I'm doing, and very much side with Vince McMahon. I'm okay with those people hating me. I'm okay if you hate watching this, if you like to. But the show did really well because of a number of reasons. Firstly, likes were way up. Secondly, even more importantly, comments were way up. So there's something on YouTube called an engagement score. The engagement score is your views divided by your total amount of likes and comments. So if I got 500 views and I got combined 30 likes and 30 comments, that means I have 60 for the engagement score against 500, which means it's more than 10% engagement. So YouTube keeps recommending it. As long as at least 1 in 10 people is leaving a comment or leaving a like, they keep advertising it. The best thing you can do for a YouTuber that you want to support is talk amongst yourselves in the comments. Genuinely. If you have your own conversations in the comments under this video will do brilliantly. So, if you are watching right now in the premiere, just pop out a live chat, pop into the comments, say hi. Just say hi. If you're watching it on repeat, same thing. Just come say hi. Because that is one of the reasons that this channel right now is doing very well once again. And you guys are making that happen. It was a new record for the amount that I have made financially from a podcast last week. I made $3. $3. A new record. So if you're able to, leave a like, make sure you've left a comment, talk amongst yourselves if you can, and let's keep this show going too. I've been Tom Colohue, you've been fantastic, and I'll see you all very soon.